Should we allow our kids to fail? It teaches limitations, it teaches boundaries, it teaches what kids can do in the current moment. But it also teaches resiliency and logic and how to apply what they've learned in the practical experience to actually enable themselves and get better. So is the real question whether they should be allowed to fail or whether we should help them become comfortable enough with that failure to understand it's not a roadblock, it's just a minor impedance as they adapt and grow and get better at what they know and learn. What I'm trying to say is by using games, we have a relatively low cost solution to allow kids to explore their boundaries, figure out what they are, be able to adapt to them and expand them, and learn that failure is not the end all be all and not to be scared of it. Kids are constantly pushed into guided activities. They're constantly pushed to do the next thing. They need to continue to do all these different things and have all these different interests. And you know what? Sometimes they just need to be able to take a step back and say, this is what I want to do, and I want to try something crazy with it, and I want to see if it works, because it's going to allow them to be creative, it's going to allow them to explore their own interests, and it's going to allow them to think outside the box. We should allow them to fail, and video games provide one of the best environments for them to do so because there's very little that can actually come back to hurt them. So how do video games go through and teach logic and responsibility and adaptability and resiliency when they're just video games? Video games are designed to cause failure, and that's actually one of the main aspects of them. Because they're not so easy that you can just breeze through them, that wouldn't captivate anybody's attention. So video games actually induce failure between 20 and 60% of the time. Some games even go as high as 80%. When we go through and we want to learn how to apply failure, you can look at Madden or NBA or MLB The Show. These are competitive sports games that show winners and losers and teamwork. Or you can go through and have Mario Kart, which is individually based, but you have winners and losers and it's a feat of skill. You can learn it. It's a low floor, high ceiling type game. Or you can have games like Horizon Zero Dawn or Titanfall or a whole bunch of other single player games that are puzzle based or logic based, and you're following a narrative and a story. And there are times when those players are going to fail, but they're going to learn what the system was. They're going to learn what the mechanic was that caused the failure, and they're going to adapt. They're going to become resilient to that failure and learn that they can pass through it and apply it to the future and avoid those failures. Now, originally I was going to say that kids could fail in video games without fear of retribution or punishment, but that's not necessarily true. Kids are going to get punished within the game for failure. So they're either going to lose a life, or they're going to lose their progress, or they're going to lose some type of data time invested if they fail in the game. But that's not going to affect them in their actual life, and it will provide them this sandbox or this environment where they can try out these new things, and kids can go through and start flexing their mental powers to go out and explore new avenues of approach on how they think about topics instead of the same rote thing. Now, am I saying that this is the only way to build mental or emotional resiliency? Absolutely not. This is just a tool in parents' toolbox for them to go forward and be able to make more resilient children that are able to handle the stresses of real life. Last time I checked, we didn't get a user manual as parents. That's part of why we're here, is to try and give parents another tool in their toolbox by using video games, which, let's face it, most kids are interested in. So if that is a situation that you're in, I suggest that you hit subscribe and hit the like button on the video so that you can actually come back and see whenever we post new videos. How many of us sit here and say, I so identify with Luis's song Surface Pressure in Encanto because it's always talking about adding more and more pressure on from all the people and see if it makes me break or not. And you know what? It might. But I hope it doesn't. Do we really want to add that pressure to our kids though? Now, a lot of yesteryear's gamers didn't quite fit the mold of that, and they might have gotten picked on, they might have just not been athletically inclined. That's okay. You don't have to be athletically inclined. Not everybody needs to be the exact same. And video games provides those that aren't athletically inclined or aren't musically inclined or aren't the most social person in class that avenue for learning. And that's really what this is kind of aimed at, is we don't have to do everything that everybody else does. Let's let our kids explore. And I actually have a video about child-directed play if you want to check that out. Link is in the description or maybe at the end. We'll see. Games can come in a couple different flavors. They can come in very easy to relax with and very just laid back games. Or they could come in like the Elden Ring and Dark Souls series, which is extremely hard and challenging and forces them to learn, grow, and adapt. But both ends of the spectrum for games provide kids and adults the ability to go through and change how they want to approach the subject or the topic or whatever the challenge is. And they can try new and different things outside the box. And if they fail, they're not going to get hurt by it. They might get a little frustrated, but that's generally about it. Additionally, allowing them to play games and explore their interests is pretty vital. I'm not gonna lie. One of the best things about allowing them to fail is actually establishing the boundaries. So what is the physical, emotional, mental boundary that we are establishing through our own ways, means, and ends by trying this? And then what do we need to do to learn? What do we need to do to practice to start pushing those boundaries farther and farther out? And video games do this, like I was talking about with a couple of the levels in the last video, which is the allure of difficult games. You go through and you see that by making games difficult and that there being a pretty high failure rate, but not super high, it allows for there to be that challenge and that dopamine hit of reward whenever they go through and succeed in playing that game and beating that boss or beating that extremely difficult challenge. Allowing kids to experience failure from an early age sets them up to do critical analysis, critical thinking, look at their environment and try and figure out what the solution's going to be, but also learn that failure's not the end. We go through school and say, we're going to test you, and if you fail, that's a really bad thing. But how many entrepreneurs go out there and they fail 1 or 2 or 3 or a dozen times before they find the thing that makes it click for them and it takes off and they make a lot of money, or they find happiness and they're able to do whatever they want to do because they tried a lot of different things and they weren't scared of failure.
Okay, that's going in the journal.
And that's where we can use games to set up a low-risk environment for kids to explore and learn that failure can be okay. Now, we are also there as parents to, establish that sometimes failure, like failure to stop at a red light, is a really bad thing because people get hurt. But that's not going to be in the video game. It does show that developing new skills and new interests takes repetition, it takes time, and it takes practice. But when we get done with that at the end, as long as we practice the right thing, we're going to have good to great success, and we're no longer going to have that same boundary. We're going to have pushed it out a little bit more. So what I'm trying to say is by using games, we have a relatively low-cost solution to allow kids to explore their boundaries, figure out what they are, be able to adapt to them and expand them, and learn that failure is not the end-all be-all, and not to be scared of it because they can still succeed after they failed at once, twice, or a dozen times. If you like this video, please do me a favor, hit subscribe and like. And if you thought this was really cool, I've got another video that talks about how to better captivate kids' attention through child-directed play using not only video games, but a couple other solutions as well. I suggest clicking on that and having a good time. This is Wes from Ridir Gaming. Do good, play hard, game on, and I'll see you next time.